Dewa Cheshun Ganeshine, Gudan, Kim Mabel Chumare, Gudan Genet in the Chumares, Dunga Cheshun Ganeshine, and Gudan Genet in the Chumares, Chisnatinza, and Gudan Kim Mabel Chumare, and the Shen, want you lost over the Zolo, Shen Yiche, Rangche Moa, Shen Yiche, and the Dumata, the Dewati Chuma, the Nea Mares, and the meeting Bigulation Mares, the Nezada, Gewa Ganeshine. Rangi Gu and a Gavi Lela Chile in Jumar, they are Timbiculet in the Jumares, and Miguel Dunga Ganesi Nea, Net Gu and a Migivi Lechilet in the Jumar, the Timbiculet Jumares, Gudan Genet in Jumar, the Nezada, Manzuke Dunga Dan, Dewat Chisa Rangi Gu, Gewadang, and Miguel Gevale, Nevarish, Tichidata. Gyuwa yunayo marese, miluwari, ten kevarese, undusi ngeba taji duji de samdaya dida, onse ngeba nye de le gyundele, ngeba nye de da yishe de geo shogores. Chisa dine zada namba sangi bilu la, chisa rangi gewa che ne gewa chepa ne dela dine jibu digi yuwa da, rangi migewa chepa dela dine jibu dunga yungu yuwa di, ande ten kevare. Chisada dada tsedela rangla dewa jun kanyin ba tan kewa nga mala soba ne dingon le ya nga zu kewa sabe kewa le tene chunga da dade nga zu dunga kanda chunga da dingon le ya nga zu ki mikewe le cheba la tene saba re chunga re sepe da dene ki da nga zu ki le kyunje le ya yuwa me ba nge ba le kyunje tachi nge ba de dene ki samla tanda de nama sanyi peke samla tanda re si yanda ba dawa le kyunje la 이집에 따와래 디양도 기위기 갈고쳐 기위기 자와 탐지기 나야기 다띠엔 마스는 시로디 디네레사지 오도시네 나도 디지 주게 되네 쉬어라 이제 매든
Good afternoon. This morning we looked at the first, we concluded looking at the first of the four points in terms of the general presentation of karma. And so that was that karma is definite. And in here, we came to recognize that happiness and suffering, whatever the magnitude, comes from its respective causes. So this means that happiness and suffering are never causeless. It's not something that one comes about due to good or bad luck, but in dependence on particular causes. Again, happiness and suffering is not something that is inflicted upon one by someone else or a creator, or one is bestowed on by a creator, nor can happiness and suffering come from an incongruent cause. Rather, virtue always leads to happiness. Non-virtue always leads to suffering. And again, this is the case for even slight results, but also for the intense results. They always come from their respective causes. So this principle of karma is infallible or non-deceptive. It is something that is certain or definite. This correct view of cause and effect is shared amongst all Buddhists. And no matter what other philosophical views Buddhists may disagree over, this presentation of cause and effect is accepted by all Buddhists. And this view of cause and effect is the very foundation for all virtuous phenomena, in that the acceptance of this view leads to a determination to abandon even slight non-virtue and strive to accumulate all forms of virtue. Thereby, this view of cause and effect is the foundation of all virtuous phenomena.
le pecha wale sa tesa denegi shune da ngozo gewa chunchun je bege ane le de tebu digi chenpo yuwa de karare yasen de shoke ngazo de pero jine di kore shu sa wale da dine 다들 가르쳐 다 미기we le 충우 le 장 제보 동아 신도 채워 중회에서 다 니걸 마셔야래.
Then came to the second of the four outlines, the magnification of karma. And there we looked at, through illustrations, how from a small virtuous deed, a great, a happy result, desired result, can come about. And now we'll continue the second half of the first sentence. So in the book, it's on page 120 in the middle. While even from a small non-virtuous action, there arises enormous suffering as its effect.
다 미기we le 충주인지 비게 제보 침보 신도 침보 중에 용거래서 제 내가 좀 배선 배로지 되네 지게 되네 수 정도 앞에네 이마 지게 라마다 로모지 예외제라 아니 라마디기 됐어 기시 마 로마디 시에 기시 주부로 시에바데스 주부로지 제 주부로 시에한테 되네 로마디 갈라레스 인라 오 주인하신 코로서 주인하신 두스 라바레스 다도 직라이다 코로서 주인하신 두스 라바레스 제가 디기 대부디다 뭐바나 알가르소스는 코로체 다가라리아 아니미지 건 나제 아니 마 그런 지부딘 조디가레제 나제 마 리소레스 리도야 랑마토레스다 야 랑마도도 야 라야게 파 지지지 발도시야 파리 주리 제도가레데 깜바니디 잘 라바데 마 잘시네 누구 주샤송레스 제가 되네기 동아 전문용 거에데 제가 직 주인하시 저 코너스 주인하시 레사지 직 디점니 라베 겐기다 콘다 제부디 아니 배 지게 제대 다가라야 그런 동안 용어에 주용어 예제 주 차바레스 송도 안에
An illustration showing how from a small cause a great result or enormous suffering can come. This is a story of a student who was spoken to roughly by or in a coarse manner by their teacher. And the students got upset and likened their teacher to a snake. Later, sometime later, when they were out walking, they fell over and were unable to lift themselves up. In fact, their arms and legs had become paralyzed, paralyzed to the sides of their body, and the only way now the student could move was by swaying their torso violently. So could only now move like a snake.
오늘 연ong 가시 신념도 소념도 실바 페디가람 안 디와 추로 되스 람바 추이지 시제 는 연ong 지기 된바 추드바 도스진 처음 잘해서 처음 되네 연ong 현다지 비우나신 지레샤스 이거 비우나신 처음서 비우나신라 도스네 칸 바도스 직되네슬라르스 제가 디기 대 제보들라 마오바나 디기 라픈 연ong디 비우기 개왕 앞질린 거 좋으레스네 제가 직디 비우나시를 충주 마도 야마다 지사다 제부디 빼면서 지금 눈을 비우기와 사랑 앞잘라서 벌린제 되네게 동안 용어에도 중어로 와 지사 되게 되네게 제사다 미기베레 충원 제발레 제부 동안 신도 침보 중국어에서 배선로시 되네시.
The second illustration is two monks were traveling together, and there was water across the road, so they had to jump over the water. And the one monk then said to the other monk as he jumped over the water, "Oh, you jump just like a monkey." And the comic result of likening this monk to a monkey was that he had to endure 500 rebirths as a monkey. So this then is an illustration that how even from a small non-virtuous action, there arises enormous suffering as its effect. Lama Tsongkhapa continues, there is nothing among external causes and effects that resembles the increase of effects from internal causes. So this is pointing out that the causes created by the mind, so the internal causes that lead to their respective effects, cannot be compared to the causes that are observed in the material world. The way that causes created by the mind work is quite different from the material world. Think of external causes, you can think of, say, seeds. And if one plants one seed, one will get one plant growing. So if one plants an apple seed, one will get an apple tree. If you plant a grain of a seed for wheat, you'll get a stalk of wheat growing. You will not get from a single apple seed a whole orchard of trees, but only one tree. So this is the presentation or the observation of cause and effect that we are most familiar with. But where the causes are consciousness or internal causes, the workings are quite different. They are not so rigid, so restricted, in that a mental cause, when ripening, can ripen in an effect across multiple lifetimes. So with the one karmic seed, when it ripens, can have an impact for over several lifetimes. So this is quite different from causes in the material world. And as always, Lama Tsongkhapa then provides quotations as a valid source for what he has written. So the meaning will be the same, but it presents the source from which Lama Tsongkhapa has drawn, so as to make clear it's not something he's making up from his own side. So from the collection of indicative verses, even creating a small bad deed will result in terrible fear and disasters in future lives, like having ingested poison. Even creating a little merit will bring great happiness in future lives and accomplish vast objectives, like grains that ripen to perfection.
제사다 데네기 풍조를 침보 제규르데 제사 데네자 데네기 디바데 라시 랑라 뇌비게 뇌섭 침보 제비게 레지제네 네베네 나저 두브로시 코모코 조나바 두쇼바나 데네 두지글 수볼라 나사 다야다 강아 뭐 제기로와 디나싱아 주기 데네 디바 충문제 디바디 라 그 강아 침보제기 단 두스제네 제 레가레 규디 차도요레 해야지 제사 데네 자디 제어도 데네게 지딘 바로 코알마이 나선마이 예진 동안 첨부 용어에 착오를 했어요.
Look in the first verse. Even creating a small bad deed will result in terrible fear and disasters in future lives. And again, this points to the point made previously, that from a cause created in this life, suffering may well result in the lower realms and over lifetimes to come. Moreover, the reference to poison shows that from is used to illustrate that just from something small, like a small amount of poison, immense physical suffering can come, and that physical pain that one can experience can last for a protracted period. So when you put these two in balance, the amount of poison that one takes as opposed to the intensity of the suffering and its duration, it seems disproportionate. But this is used to illustrate then that from what appears to be a small misdeed, great suffering can follow.
야 tarvata temji kimbe ko ba to yadi yungo re sen chitem power deshin chitem power kewa chimo ngondio ko ba to yada deshin je sen de le nyalam nyamne je bala tene ane chi na tardo chachun ba dang tene ge ko ba to ba de yungo re se deshin deja denchen da yan ji gyu de zhunen pu zo chen pe na je za de ne ge gewi chunyu sa ba na pe de da chenbu zhu tu ye de cha go re yo de da chenbu zhu tu ye cha go je de pe ne zhu ru ji na ma da ji min yo de 제부 풍수 소바 진도 안주야 롱주 풍수 소바 용하게 주 풍수 그 차고도 와디나시리 해서지 주는 풍수 미바신세.
Then the converse is also the case now. The fifth verse, even creating a little merit will bring great happiness in future lives and accomplish vast objectives like grains that ripen to perfection. So again, virtue created in this life, the karmic result can lead to rebirth in higher realms, and it can have the strength to have a positive impact for lifetimes to come. And moreover, as we see in the third line, and accomplish vast objectives. So virtuous causes we create in this life can be part of those causes that lead to our eventual attainment of liberation or even enlightenment. So it may well seem that some of the virtue we create is minor, but it can be part of the overall causes that lead to our ongoing spiritual development lifetime to lifetime and our eventual attainment of Buddhahood. And then this is likened to grains not merely ripening, but ripening to perfection, the fullest extent of what is possible being achieved. The meaning of those verses is just was as presented above, and I spoke about it in more detail this morning. So then we come to the third of the four outlines. You do not meet with karma you have not created. If you have not accumulated karma that will become the cause for experiencing happiness or suffering, you will never experience a happiness or suffering that is its effect. Also, those who enjoy the effects of the teacher's accumulation of an incalculable accumulation of merit do not need to accumulate all its causes, however they need to accumulate one part of them.
기위리에 마사바는 디부 대화디 때는 용 말이스 미기위리에 사메나 디부 동하디 때는 용 말, 요아디 때는 용 말이스
Look at the first sentence. If you have not accumulated karma that will become the cause for experiencing happiness or suffering, you will never experience a happiness or suffering that is its effect. So if there's a particular result that one desires, if one has not created those causes, that result cannot be achieved. Likewise, if there's a particular result that one fears, if you have not accumulated its cause, that result cannot be experienced.
아니네게 도시네다 도나 디슈슈가 숨바 지바리에 가서는 대도 간에 체중 간에 심에나 그런 거 아니 규치 사바 규레티네 중국마다 규매발 연구 말와 제자다 대화 간에 대위기 초와 대화로 대화 간에 시네 되고 아니 규개와지 사네 되는 연구를 동화 간에 시네 유 아니 미개와 사바 연구를 해서 디쇼 숨바다 도나 지바 제자다 진짜 저기 동화 규사면은 대부분 하야 말다 지단에 아주 지용 내다셰베 나가도 치료이나 대부분 사본면은 대부분 미야요 말와다 어디나 시당 아주 동화다 대화세도 규사면은 요 대부 때는 용 말해서 진짜 내 맞아봐다 맞아봐서 소소게 되니 동화 요야게 레디 제메나 근데 대부분 요야 말해서 제사다 소소게 대화 요야게 레디 제메나 저 대화디 요야게 요야 말해서 내 맞아봐다 맞아봐 진짜 내 맞아봐는 규리 마사바는 되어야요 말해서.
This is related to what we looked at this morning, that happiness and suffering do not arise without a cause. In other words, happiness and suffering is never causeless. So if there's a particular result one desires, merely desiring it is insufficient. Those causes have to be accumulated, and they need to be of sufficient strength to bring about the desired result. Just like if you want to have a particular crop grow in your field, you need to plant the correct seeds. And if you want it to be a substantial crop, just planting a few seeds will not bring about that result. And so too with suffering. If there's a suffering result that one fears, by ensuring one does not accumulate those causes, that result will never be experienced. So feelings of happiness or suffering, that which we desire, that which we fear, only come about independent on those causes. If they've been accumulated, they will be experienced. If they have not, they will not be experienced.
디 탐제 싸미규 그냥 차지 싸고서 어세 제자다 저기 된비기 초장매 봐 사비 지우스 당한 저기 롱주고를 해지래 제자다 상기 베네템바샤게 투비기 구수되게 안에 주야디 템바샤게 투고 그런 게 수남 초사제 초 가진 간바 빠도매 봐 사제 초사발 되는 주비기 제부 차려로 봐 안에 상기 송다 디스 차상 도수와 제자다 저기 당한 저기 니마다 지주도 되셔지 상여 점내기 초유고 뭐소제 송모소 퇴거로 와다 제가 롱주거로 와 제가 상기 요구디 템바샤게 두베 상기 요구디 그런 구수디 상기 그런 기 초배가신 장면 나서 초망부사는 주셔비기다 제부차들로 와다但이내 로마지 요구디 제이제는 안데 제기 통고를 롱주거로 와지래 통고로 와 비슷한 통고 제기로 와서 디나샤 상기 송 그러다 상기 송디야 상기 그런 게 초바도면 봐 사제 사비 제부 차려 이나디 로마지기다 롱주거로 와서 제사다 디네 자당한 저 가르솜스는 제사 상기 구수디 나 저기 소남산에 산에 나 저기 기위레레 되는 두교 말에 상기 그런 게초 사개와서는 기위레레 되는 두교 제부 치리 제사당 안주기 뒤통은 제 통롱주에디 다 가르레 안행 안주기 규마사제 안주기 규개와 마사바제 안주기 롱주도 와서 통도 와서지 땅 안줄래 되니기 다 똑발마서는 지금 연구를 와야 되네 제사다 되니기 제부 분순 초바디 롱주 발라 인지미지 소소게 손음 싸고 민도와 ben에 좀 마셔게 되비 구디 아 저기 제제 롱주 거데 이내 디구디 주비에 규定아주 싸매와스 사고 말와스 되니게 삼 중국어 대지 가르서는 아주 개와 마사바디 마수기 주비에 얼마에 손을 받아 소수기 롱주에 요 말에서지.
The second sentence. Also, those who enjoy the effects of the teacher's accumulation of an incalculable accumulation of merit do not need to accumulate all his causes. However, they need to accumulate one part of them. So this is addressing a question that may come, in that for a being to achieve Buddhahood, such as Buddha Shakyamuni, incredible amounts of virtue are needed. So it's a huge store of virtue required that the practitioner needs to create in order to attain the body of a Buddha with all its marks and signs. It's a huge collection of causes required to have the speech of a Buddha and so forth. So it's an incredible number of virtuous causes that a Buddha creates, that a being creates in order to become a Buddha. And when that is done, it's not only this being who now attains enlightenment who benefits from their countless eons of hard work, but others also benefit. Those who are directly in the retinue, so we're taking Buddha Shakyamuni as an illustration, those who are directly in his retinue, those who through him receive benefit, and those for lifetimes later or millennia later receive benefit from all that he did. So here then a question can come. How can we, for example, how can ourselves, for example, receive benefit from the hard work that the being who went on to become Buddha Shakyamuni engaged in? Because we all do receive benefit. The word you'll hear in other contexts is enjoyment. We gain enjoyment, where it's really benefit, from the Buddha's hard work. So we enjoy benefits from what he has attained. So how is this possible? Because the Buddha did the hard work. The Buddha accumulated those karmic causes. And as we see in this outline, we do not meet with karma we have not created. So, but yet we are receiving benefit from the Buddha's hard work. So how can this be possible?
Yenza dinegi tumbigi cho changme ba saibigi jebu san yukuda and la sobegi jebu dige da duja chitchi duja nam yu longji yodu and dige yusa yorbe yomaresene de yutamje sa migu kyans 지상 디 san yukudu bi yudi an 저게 유탐제 안에서 싸고 말에 이내 차직 싸고 그래서 저게 롱지 얘기 안 저기 규칙 싸고 그래 규칙 차직들 사 차상 싸 먹어놔야 우리 주위에 용 롱지 규칙 싸고 그래서 차직 싸고 해서 디 싸미 탐제 탐제남기 유탐제 싸미 그 산 yukudu bi 유참제 안에서 싸고 말에 이 산지 그런 주비 싸바래서 이내당 안주기 꾸제기 쇠남 차치사고 그래서 직마사는 이내 영화야 말해서 이제 쇠남 사면은 영화야 맞지다 차치 인지미시 차치사고 그래서 그래서
So what has been presented in this doubt actually largely makes sense in that for a being to arise as a Buddha, incredible amounts of virtue is required to gain the body of a Buddha with all its marks and signs, as well as the qualities of speech and mind and enlightened activities and so forth. So uncountable causes were accumulated for this. And for us to be able to interact with and gain benefits from such a being, we don't have to accumulate those same causes, but merely a part. And in this way, one can have an interdependency to interact with and gain benefits from, as in this case, Buddha Shakyamuni.
나디니 자다 차치 사고레시도 다 가르사고레스네 다 소시라라게 마음반에 베능아도 됨바시기 되고 구제네 마음반에 상이좀네데 초고두게 남바도 전부레데 표현돼 아니게 상이이 아니 지 상이 공고소제 상예전에 구제 상예전에 아니 지 최용어서 휴이제 냐메지 요거 러버 쇼스비 데니게 몰람소스라 몰람게 데니게 와서 발에 데네 아니 지게 어디 제래 언제마 상이 좀 되는데 zemble chogu number 2 payondu and sanje gungu suji disane chushuere gogapdi koransu nyamane denegi molam gewa sabala dene and sanje gungu suji do barwa jesnada diyu sanje xie shubi gala sanje gungu suji sanje gizane chue tue chue shuje jehen chazam da mangcho da dacham bada de lam nyamne gyule lam gyule ge lam sa lam gyule ge diwa chagorwa jesnan konzo dinyamane koransulia denegi 직 몰람 망고 예비기다 제bol에 되는 거 개와 사발 되는 자 몰람 개발자 상기 공무수지 되는 주용어수 퇴 안지고 합라로 지상 알아서다 되는게다 몰람지 다시 마개발 하디고 차고 제자 되자 상이 좀 저거게 남바지 표현돼 가지고 기네 제투요 말하다 제투요 말에 상이즈는 상기게 취 나지 공무수라 뭐 전에 공무에서 내다 취시요 거같이 말해봐 이내 당을 저기도 몰람라지 겹지 개발을 사대요. 내가 상이 이내다 상이 공무수제다 상이 공무에서네 송퇴게 선음도 사마도 바지 이내 당을 저기 선음 가서 사요 바래. 제가 상이 좀 된디기 템발이야 대발 제수다 대발제디 템발아주 상기게다 송비 최디 당을 저기 상이 공무에서네 제모도 나야 상기기마 진행지를 규제 라메자는 저야 상기기 어촌에 최대 최퇴지 아주 냠내지 고라와 저는 지라와디다 양아 중에 아직 몰람다 개와지 사비게 개위를 되는 용안이 임바로 되네게 개와디야 누가 치중에서 몰람 되네게 누가 치중을 되네 다 되네게 용도 거르와다
Final part of the sentence, they need to accumulate one part of them. What this would refer to here is that, again, we're staying with the illustration of Buddha Shakyamuni. Those practitioners who had the great fortune to be in the world, in that particular region, at that particular time, they would have made prayers in lives previous to that. Prayers that when a Buddha appears in the world and teaches the Dharma, may they be in the world in his presence, recognize him as the remarkable teacher he is, receive guidance, and rapidly spiritually develop. So they would have made many prayers like that. So when the overall causes were created, the causes and conditions for Buddha Shakyamuni to turn the wheel of Dharma, those practitioners who in lifetimes previous had made such prayers, they were in this world, in the right place, at the right time, of a suitable age, that they could receive guidance from him. And this almost certainly would have been the case for all those practitioners who so quickly became arhats in the lifetime of the Buddha. This is how we can observe the ripening effect of their prayers. Their prayers would have been part of their overall spiritual development, and then all that virtue coming together under the power of their prayers in the presence of a real turning Buddha, and they achieved the extraordinary result of becoming an arhat. So for ourselves, well, all those centuries ago, those millennia ago, we had not created such causes. But now, certainly in this rebirth, we are, through prayers we make, through prayers we recite, we are making similar causes. So whilst in the case of Buddha Shakyamuni, he has already appeared in this world, still making prayers to be in the presence of the Dharma and spiritual teachers is incredibly important. And perhaps in lives previous to this, we have made such prayers. Hence, here in this distant land, we have once again met the Dharma, have faith in the Dharma, have access to a spiritual teacher, and to receive guidance. And we have sufficient interest to want to cultivate the minds of the Dharma within. So this opportunity that we have right now is a result of prayers and we would have made in lives previous to this.
Temba Sangelia, Devada, Sange Jumdendigi, Tembi Chelia, and Devada Kubach, Jenyangi, Kanto Chitu Yusosugi, that Devache, Denigi, that Yamneji, Tesam, Komsum Jeradi, that Dichi Gyawang Amenamania, Tushang Azuki, Tasangi Jimnelli, Jawash Molam Japtiniki, Deva Chevigita, Muskumus Jimena, at the negative table in the Chadero, the new India Damas do in Moody, Yamen Jed, Jane, and like Aranzugita, Tajumbeki, Jilam Guleki, Tajumiti Tobana, the Yamushirade, Kisi Tomata Benena, Mo Banaya, Jawachamba Compigeta. Zamboli de la Chogo to get number to pay do, and Delia, and Jawa Chamber Combigi, Tamanzuti, Hachuloma Masona, and the Kungusu J, that the Loma and Loma Tragata, you are sure, say two, Yurchan, Delia, and G, said Nami Kungusu J, this and Sungusu Tuache, the Lam Yaming Bati Cheche, and Sanju Copa Topa Shores, be Molam, the Negi Gavado. And Digi some judge Molanja Balatine as more by the Denigi, Monsiba Chagurova, the Nezadanazu, the Nigi Kiwi, settle and Yamagang to Cetera. Temba Shaggy to pay Temba de Maniam Dita, Taharalia, Lam Yamin Gula Chase, Tajumata, San Yuko Toba Show, and Piggy, Yamin, Diditon and Yamachana, Casey, the Nigi Tomato Baina, and the more by the Jawachambagova, and Zambuli to the pair, Chogo to number to pay that teller, the Loma and Tar, the Zoro Jason, Loma Zoro Jason, the Nan, Chish, you go to Chish, then Dana Tajaba, the Tamjiki Moko, you are sure Sibumalam Jadi, that Yasim was Chagore.
One should take this presentation that one does not meet with karma that one has not created, to understand that it's important that we accumulate virtue, that we study and reflect on the teachings so as to aid our faith, to develop our faith, and to aid our accumulation of virtue, and to make prayers. So the prayers are particularly useful to generate aspiration in us, hence often called aspirational prayers, to generate aspiration to inspire us to accumulate ever more virtue, as well as then when we dedicate virtue, to dedicate it to a similar purpose as expressed in those aspirational prayers. For us ourselves now, we should be dedicating towards and striving towards the attainment of enlightenment. And we should have as an aspiration, if I do not do so in this life, may I continue from life to life to life, always meeting the Dharma, being under the direct guidance of my spiritual teachers. And should I not have done so by the time the Dharma, should I not have done so despite my ongoing efforts, by the time the Dharma disappears from the world, when the future Buddha, Buddha Maitreya, appears in a world and represents the Dharma, may I then be amongst his close circle of students and strive then to achieve enlightenment. So this is an important takeaway from this point.
Le ke mige jeba namki idu ong mi ong ge jebu jimba des da inji minje le do sin jebu yonguri esashi.
Now the fourth point, karma you have created does not dissipate. The virtuous and non-virtuous actions that have been done will bring forth pleasant and unpleasant effects. So the karma created will not naturally fade away.
지난다 레게 미게 제바 남기 이도 용화다 묘화서 레 계획이 되고 이도 용화 대화되시와 레 미게 왜 되고 이도 묘화 되와 지난 되고 진바대에서 인지 메지다 되고 용구리에서 되고 매바 차기 말해서 레 개와 제바이나 레와 개와 체중 간의 제바인데 디 되고 체중 곧 유대다 튠비기 되고지 발리기에서 달레 미게와 제바이나 디에는 되고 내 미가와 체중 간의 제반에 디 되고 튠비 동아 체중이 다다 유디 용구를 했을 때 징그리 용구를 마도 매와 그냥 자기 말해 사실.
So look at that sentence, that it is virtuous karma that leads to pleasant effects. It's non-virtuous karma that leads to unpleasant effects. So therefore, the virtue that has been created will lead to happiness. It will not just fade away on its own. Likewise, non-virtue that one has created will also not just fade away, but will lead to unpleasant results.
잠재 남니 길이다 진바 렌신 포얼마 휴기 제 취미사랑 마제바단 체미 송세당스.
Now Lama Tsongkhapa quotes from the praise of the Exalted One. Brahmins claim that good and bad deeds are transferable like gifts one receives. You teach that deeds done are never lost, and what is not done will not be met.
제사다 개와 바되게 상여 점는 될래야 개바도 파바 되바나라 가르송여스네. 나 잠재 남니 게리다 진벌len신 포월마 시대 잠재 치료파 공원주기 되니리치기다 되니게 바 개와된 디비게 제부 아니 대화도 동화세디 진벌지기 파제 지수 렘바나신직 송고레스 제사다 지된 거법마 대신 셰보 원초로 제발에 세다 지조의 제발에 사실 대수적으로 제사 되니게 마지게 소수기 제모가지 현다지 제시 소소의 제제 주렘바나신 지레 파제 지렘바나신데 최고레스 되는 송고레스 되는 마스의 잠재 남니 게리다 진발len신 포와 마스 제사 되니게 디바다 찬래야 포 찬래 제샤가 봐 개와네 찬래 대화지 찬래 제가 바로 시고레스 송고레스.
The text is praise of the Exalted One, where the Exalted One is Buddha Shakyamuni, so it's a text of praise for him. And in here it states a non-Buddhist view that virtue can be given to someone else. Conversely, someone can receive the virtue accumulated by another person. And so too with non-virtue or bad deeds. Non-virtue can be given to others, and others can receive non-virtue that others have created.
교육이 제취 미사당 마제바단 체메 송시대 상여 좀 내내 교육이 가르친 거였습니다. 상여 좀 내내 결혼기 가르친 것은 제산 소수기 레 개와 제바 있나 디 제부 소설야 디기도 용거래 취석이고 말 취미세 바래 제산디 대부 인지미주 매바 차가 인지미주 용거래서 근데 소설하는 게 디버 제외나 디 대부 동화대 인지미주 용거래 취석 되는 순고래서 결혼에 대해 순고도 제사다 마제바다 체메 송스 제사다 소수기 디버 제메나 디 대부 동화대 용 말에 송샤스 제사 소수기 레 개와 사면에 제부 대에 디와대 용 말에서 제사다지 결혼기 소소라는기 대화 디기 녀야 돼. 유 소소라는 게 개와 줍제. 소소라는 게 개와 줍고 그래서 소소한 거지. 소소라는 게 동화세에 돼. 동화녀한테 소소라는 데 용거. 제사 현이 지제 먹어 봐지. 랑기 규사제. 제부 중화데 송고도 제사다. 안되니게다. 결혼 송바데다 된다라. 된바상이 결혼 송에디 된바래샤 세야데. 대디디 로레 태바다. 인지미시 다 규단 유 제보 유지를 현실에 때내 중국 여바다 되니게다 다가로 태바를 레샤사지 그런 게 두선 되바 지고로와 내가도 치료용 거에 제보 사원 유지 때문에 제보 중국 여바다 마도 유기네 매바지 제보 지파 유아에 매바디 세고 차고로와 되네자다 상유 좀 내되게 된 현기다 간실에 동화다 대화의 랑게스 레사 먹어봐 제모가지 현다지 파제 전에 두셔야지 여바를 송샤디야 대 김세는 템바 차금이 누워서 거다 donala den sanye kyorangi soya di da soso rangi le garisa bene didu dige debu deletin yungu bade sonshas 제사다 소수기 le gedu garisa bene debu tinde nyong bogure se di chimisa wale sonshas kyorang은 세 송아디다 김세는 템바다 근데 지바데 템바 차기도 우세지 근데 되게 다 되어버려 되는 거로
Third and fourth line, you teach that deeds done are never lost, and what is not done will not be met. So looking at the first of these two lines, you teach that deeds done are never lost. So if one accumulates virtue, you will necessarily experience that happy result. And likewise, if one accumulates non-virtue, you will necessarily experience that suffering. It's not that causes created disappear. They will eventually ripen. And then the fourth line, and what is not done will not be met. So this refers to the previous point. If one has not created particular virtuous causes, their result will not be attained. In other words, if there is a particular spiritual goal one desires, one has to accumulate those causes and of sufficient magnitude to achieve that result. But so too with suffering. If there's a particular result one does not want to experience, if one hasn't accumulated the causes, one will not experience the result. So these two lines then serve to present this point and the point above. And Buddha then is praised here for the correct presentation of cause and effect, as opposed to the mistaken presentations which were prevalent in the time of the Buddha. So again, if one creates virtuous causes, one can be confident one will experience those results in the future. But it is imperative, relating the point above, that those causes are created, because merely aspiring or hoping for something will not bring it about. Then the King of Concentration Sutra. What is done will never not be met. What others did, you will not experience.
디나신다 소수기 미기 윌레지 제반에 디 대부 동아디 미규와 말에 용구리 해야지 미규와 말에 대야 제네 레버 미규를 민세.
So this is the same meaning. Again, Lama Tsongkhapa draws on it to establish that karma you've created does not dissipate, establish the source for it. And here the source is the Buddha himself. The Buddha states, with a double negative, what is done will never not be met. In other words, the causes that are created, those results will be experienced. And the second line, and it goes to refute what we saw in the previous line, that Brahmins assert that something that others do you can experience. And it says here that you cannot give karma, give a virtue or non-virtue. And what others did, you will not experience.
현기 제보 초월 규왕매 시대 소수기 개와 마사와제 미션다지 개와 사제 니기 개위 제보 초와 대화디 소설 용어요 말레스 로아 용어요 말레스 양 소수기 디바 마제베 미션다지 디비레 사제 니 제보된 안 소설이야 아니 초와 동안 용어데 요 말레스 제가 랑게 되지 그래서 레 미제바다 마체바세 디샤고 지신 거래 제가 디 디엔자 소수기 기위 레 마사바 미션다지 기위 레 사제 디기 제보 초 동아딩 대화딩 안 중요해요 말레스 소수기 미기위 레 마사바 있나 미션다지 사발에 되네 소수기 데니기 초위 동아디 소수요요 말레스 소수 레 마제바 있나 디디보도 요요 말레스 안디로와 현기 제바 유 초월 용어
So therefore, the non-virtue that you have accumulated, you will need to experience. It cannot be taken by others, you cannot give it away. Likewise, the virtue that you accumulate, you will experience that. You cannot give that away either. That is something you will experience.
데네 망보 제르미치 소야데 도나 가르송 거스는 제르미치 되지 한주기 레 개월 쉐발 데네 대원 용구레 대원 용화데 레 개월 마사바나 뇨요 말레스마 지세 동아 요한테 레 미가 사발에 되는 미가 동아 용을 마도 뒤에 소수게 마사바나 디뇨 요 말레스 지송요를 제사당 안에 다 디제름 지송샤데 내 다다 이나면서 이체마지 용을 와 제사 제름 지게다 디 공디 다 이 시에서 마임바 아니 신 개발은 지송요당 안 도다 되는 게 롱나로 송고 되는 요래서 마 공정거라 돼서 다 얘네 아주게 계획 개와 가능시나 개와 개와 질레티네 두구리 개회를 레티네 용구리에 세다 동화 간의 치중 간의시나 제고 치중 간의시면 유 안데 미가와텔 용구를 진짜 취미서 와레스베 되네길리에 균제 녀바데 안데 직비 주야당 롱구 주야 롱리 이비건데다 롱데서 도신 롱구건데 주야라서 봐 직비 주야 되네게 마 도신 네 마송 내가지나 되네기 돈에 삼다 롱나를 가르가르도 되네기 롱구도 안데 다 개바주에 마 도나라 가로 손샤 네 개로 개바 번디다는 게 간에 손샤 도신 되네 손도 하서 메델이야 손년 되네 이시치야가 소수의 김전 삼다 제바제 되네 지사에 되네 오다 된데 레샤 셈비리 대화되나라 개와 간에 대화를 되네 중요 대화 간에시나 아니 유개와를 되네 중요 봐 누가 간에시면에 유미가 warle tenjo tende redo sembida ngeba nye ko wa de ngeba nye dida sosugi jeba je rigwa samta rigwe samta ya da andelia ani ji lung khaba nam yu lung do da tenjo la so so de ki ba lung de ki ba chimjuk je ando chene lung da rigwa nye ge thone samta je da le de de miluwa yimba de ne ki ngeba nye ba ko wa da.
This point that karma you have created does not dissipate, but it has to be experienced. So this point, as well as much of what is presented in this chapter on cause and effect, is difficult to establish in that it's not so easily observable what is a specific cause that leads to a particular result. So in this case, that karma that has been created doesn't just over lifetimes lose its strength. This is difficult to understand. Therefore, whilst Lama Tsongkhapa always relies on quotations to make it clear that they are valid sources for what he presents, it's not just his understanding, his own personal opinion. Quotations are a key, relying on quotations is a key way to come to develop firm faith of conviction in this presentation, because so much of the presentation on karmic relationships is subtle and difficult to understand. So in many cases, one can use reasoning, and there we are all encouraged to use reasoning, to think about what's presented, and to try and come to gain our firm conviction based on reasoning, and to supplement this, particularly in this topic, by relying on quotations. Because what's important is to come to a firm faith of conviction in cause and effect, which is the actual title of this of this chapter. So it was as the first outline on the previous page. This needs to be the result we come to as we move through, and certainly by the end of this chapter, a firm faith of conviction, because as we've seen, that the presentation of cause and effect is the foundation of all virtuous phenomena. It is the way by which one abandons all causes of suffering, including what we are deeply habituated to and what we'd otherwise dismiss as slight, and strive to accumulate virtue and virtue alone.
Zambulinda Tawadi, Nibala Kora Jagores, Shigurua, Chesan Kora Jagora, want to sim Tajido, that to Kora Jagora, sim Dine, Shigurua. That is my Jewett now, the Joranga, how good that she is that he didn't said, and the cavity shares, Dina shares, and it is sending by the Tashi Shimji, quite near Quahores. Chesan, the Kola Yishi, sending by near only a Yishi on the Taharanda, Tachurua. Dinani Chagor watches that dona tiniki toilet in the song, tenjunale tene sungyo sembegida onto delege sungbade 이제 다주 지금 해봐 예직 작업으로 사데 zemle 거라je 상한주 인고수 토나 직 냠녀지 직 통을 배 통요 말다 있는 단대리 상한주 다 지거로 다 제바디 가르스네 아니 그 안디 캐버디기 심주시 하고 말이야지 디나시로 메르 벤다 자모레 디나나 자그레서 직접 타죠 결혼가데 하고 말디 곧 냠시바데서 고도스 다시 하고 말이야서 현代하고 되니 될 이시진은 이시진 조고.
And this approach is actually very similar for what we, how we live our lives, what we apply in a vast number of circumstances. So, for example, I imagine that all of you have unshakable faith of conviction that the earth circles the sun. And if I ask you, how do you know this? You will say, oh, I rely on those with more knowledge in this particular field and particular skill sets, so mathematicians and astronomers, who have done the calculations and have proven it. And could we present it in a way that is clear and free of fault? Possibly not. But because we have trust that there are those who know the topics such as these far better than we likely ever will, we can accept that the earth circles the sun rather than that the sun circles the earth. So this is one illustration, but there's so much of life that we accept based on the authority of those who have knowledge and skill in particular areas that we lack. And so too, certainly with a case such as the hidden workings of karma.
denegi dambo mi sheshe ya ji nyamju shege de la yichi chang za ta je le dire sa de du sin ke lin je do ne gele je su su ran simju che don go ga ro ra yon de ne kon zu she ba na jin de ne bu du chi ne simju che de han so so ge a ji ji ha go ye de nyamyo do o da de ne re sha sa be da shin ne so so ge nyamyo che ma ro ji ye ji yung go wa o di na shi da de nga zu gyu la de nyamyo cha me da de ne ge da ge wa ji ji de de bu de yung go du nga de ge wa le de yung go du nga de ge be ne 디티고 안데 미가와레 된 용고레스 안데 가르선 도다 텐션 안데 송샤라 메딘데 송구도스 두치네 콘 송완 직바지 케렌제 안데네야 소소르게 지고 김제 삼다제 바제제제베네 데네 라바라바디게 안데 디타다 레도 아셈베게다 안쪽에 라바라바 자고도 그러와 라바라바 하고도 요네 데네야 진의 심주시제 안데 야 차차 하고 대체도 데네 오다다다 레도 아셈베다 냠용 체마다 다 도비 참아스 냠냠 참아스 때 네리도 거라마도 담보 거라는 참아야 돼야죠 말아.
Much of the Dharma can be established through reasoning, and it is imperative that those topics are established through reasoning. And this is done by this joint process of perpetual gathering of knowledge and investigation based on that knowledge, integrating it by using logic and reasoning. So this is important to do because we start out from the starting point of a lack of knowledge, so the ignorance of confusion. And as we gather knowledge, we at least come to gather an understanding of how it is said to be. But then by gathering ever more knowledge and thinking for ourselves, investigating, analyzing, we will develop initially inferential valid cognizers and eventually direct valid cognizers, where we come to see clearly for ourselves the way something works. And in this, at that point, one has unshakable faith that is based on reasoning. Then with such conviction or faith, one will, that knowledge that has been integrated now through analysis will have a transformative impact on one's very way of thinking. Now, and for the areas of knowledge that are difficult to establish by way of reasoning, there we rely largely on quotations, but as in other areas, things that had seemed doubtful to us previously, through coming to recognize their validity, through gathering knowledge and using our reasoning, seeing that the Dharma in many instances, first what we thought was improbable turned out based on our own reasoning to be the case, it makes it much easier to accept what cannot be established by our current level of intelligence, and that we take on the scriptural knowledge. Because in the areas where we can establish something by way of reasoning, the scriptural knowledge has been shown to be correct. So therefore it's imperative in all areas we follow this process of gathering knowledge and investigating, thinking ever more deeply. And where we come up against doubts, gather more knowledge, think more deeply. And in this way, one will come to develop valid cognizers, recognizing the validity of the various presentations.
파 숨다지 미지 통화데 개매셔 숨다 때문에 추에 숨다 때문에 textil에 라그로디 야고여버디 세바하고 들도와 파이 그 숨다 때 야고 삼다 지제베 넘주 때문에 디 제버들 추에 넘주 야고 때문에 여버디 세부로와 딩아서 하고 두고도와 단 직통어도 파는 넘주 누저에 칭한바지 디실라바이나 디기 제버들 추에 넘주 한바데 칭한바라요데 여버디 세부가 하고 두고도와 야한테는 바서 저도 갑들이네 넘겨 안바야 마다 사바야 마다 가스 낭매지 두 스테베네 파저 미디게 술이야 낭매지 되마도 디 두아다 두아 지금 말에 숨다데 하데 용바와 제가 되니기 소수게 자와 가는 제베네 델레디네 제보 상어 여바디 디네 rakpa 땡한테 세부 원숨이 하고 두야 차기도와 지다 디나지도 도시는 삼당이 된지도 그 시프트 팔 차차차차 하고 두야 디 차기도와
with the very subtle presentations like here on cause and effect. A skillful approach is to operate or to observe what we, to think about what we can observe and use this as a basis to come to a deeper understanding of cause and effect, and recognize how the way you present yourself has an impact on others, and the way they present themselves has an impact on you. So when you meet someone and you meet them with a smile and with genuine warmth, watch how that has a certain impact on them. Whereas at another time, hopefully not intentionally, but afterwards you look back and say, I took out my bad mood on someone, and look at how they responded. And you see the difference. So in this way, on a very coarse level, one recognizes this interplay of interdependency, of cause and effect, that if one engages with others in a particular way, it will have an influence on how they relate back to you. And this way, one comes through a coarse level of observation, or observing at a coarse level, one comes to recognize this interplay of cause and effect, and this then has an impact on how one chooses to present oneself, recognizing that a certain way of interacting with others leads to a beneficial result, and another way leads to an undesired result, becomes clear how to skillfully interact with others.
Le nam kawa njarya ni chume sawang chodang du nyene luchen namla ni devo dadu chungwa gyurwa ni che songsos.
Final quotation in the section from Lama Tsongkhapa is from the chapters of scriptural transmission, which is also from Sutra. Actions never come to naught, even after 100 eons. When the time comes and the conditions are met, beings will surely experience their effects.
le gewa inada, le migewa inada, le namsede, le gewa inada, migewa karine, le di sache, pe jibu mamin bachi, pe kawa la sopa, lo mangbu kawa mangbu droba ina ya, kawa gyala sopa droba ina ya, di jibu di maungpa na, ane chu misawa jinji miji, chu misawa, mingiri esu, chu misawa, cho dan, du dan, nye na sidi, gyu gen chasang cho ba dan. 见错它是见车上错用的错吧的，那对的面个就是人吧的，的那个cấp的那个内容的，那旅行是的sem chân的了呀，的sem chân那么了，那这个的他给我你是这个的明个的说，本来给为来是啥去，给我啥去吧的，的那给为来的这个没明白，但个这个明白的了呀，见忙不错过的，就是就过的，过好吃啥过的。 제가 되네기 고갑다 긴 마상의 긴지 대부분 민바주 유니버시나 냄시 세나 되네로 가와 먹고 줘버이네 개 줘버이네 이제리야 뒤수기엔 차상 초에다 뒤수다 근데 되네기 고갑대 니에도 라용도 니에 봐서 고갑 라와서 고갑 라용도 되네 루션 셈전되게야 대위 대부디 유교그레스 이나시다 미기 벨레지 사지 제보디 마민바지 동안 마민바지 가와 갤라서 줘여바네 데니게다 겐지 겐차상 초 안뒤수티 다다 렘바 중요도 안 리체 셈젠델야 안 제보 동아디 용거리에서 용거리에서 숨고다 제가 다디게 두가르 숨고라서는 예이 되고 취미사와서야디 제가 규디 제보 규사사와데 제보디 취사가 뭐야 차가 인지미 중고에서야디 다디 숨고도와
The first word, actions. Again, just as a reminder, the word actions is the word karma. Sometimes the translator chose to use English rather than the word karma. So actions will refer to virtuous actions as well as non-virtuous actions or karma. Never come to naught even after 100 eons. So this is making the very point of this outline, that karma you have created does not dissipate. Whether that karmic action is virtuous or not virtuous, and whether the time is hundreds of eons, it doesn't fade away into nothing. Rather, when it meets, and the verse continues, when the time comes, when it's at the right time, and the ripening conditions are met, then sentient beings will experience the ripening effect. When the causes are created and they're abiding on their continuum, when the ripening conditions are met and it's the right situation, the right opportunity as well as the right time, then those karmic imprints will ripen and beings will experience those karmic results.
제가 니네 자당한 저기 레디 될야 리글라 마소는 숨로 시거래 지사 통치 용유기 레세 통치 용유기 레세 직제 기내 용유기 레세 직제 얘네 렌다 셀라 용유기 레세 직제 가지고 숨로래 대단다 왔다 뒤로 don다는 게 제시격으로 셀라 당보다 직디디라 저 통치 용유기 레세 체다가라 레세 체다가라 용유기 직요레세 제고 지금 그래 내 지금 그래 제 저는 레지 사제 체 다가라 체 될 만용 와지 시체 개와 치마들 녀에게 내 지금 그래 내가 끼네 녀유래 개와 치마야 개 개와래 내가 녀에 미야게 제보들라 레들라 끼네 녀유래 라게 제 다야 레지 사데 체 될라 마민 바 개와 치마라 많이 바지 개와 기딜레 마온바네 개와 기디네 니 숨싱아 야동 가와라 소베디 제레 녀에게 레 나서 중그래서 그래서 끼네 녀유기래서 그래서 렌자 셴라 녀유기래서 제가 레 뮤직미라고 숨은 거래 제가 레디 사제 체디기 되고데 체다가라 마시버 다가라는 녀에게 되고들라 끼네 녀유기 그래서 통치 녀유기래서 통화 체대 다가라 녀 통치 녀유기래라고 그래지 다 레지 사제 체대를 뭐냐지 개와 치마지 개와는 개와 치매 다가 된 다가라는 되고니 미야기 레지어와 대래 끼네 녀유기래서 민다고 그래서 다 되네 레 사제 디 개와 치마 뭐냐지 디 개와 제마 기디 녀요 말다 개와 니 숨시가 두 자라스 돈라스 기디 녀야게 갑레 녀야게 니 숨라스 실라 되네 녀야게 레 망고여와 디슬 미디라 렌자 실라 녀유기래서 제가 민 도스체네 예왈마소도 숨치는 송거래.
In this presentation on cause and effect, you'll see there are many different ways that causes and effects are divided. So one way is that karmic causes can be divided into three, depending on when they ripen. So there are those karmic causes which will ripen in the same life that they are accumulated. The second is those karmic causes that are accumulated and ripen in the very next rebirth. And then the third is karmic causes that are accumulated and ripen in lives beyond that. So in other words, two or more lives from now. So this is one way that karmic causes are divided in relation to the lifespan in which they ripen. The same life as created, the immediately subsequent life, or lives beyond that.
지게 주년에 로미교라 내 파비기 통남교를 개발해 세다 세다가라나 자주미 되고 토발해 세다 손에 도와줘서 다 디니기 다 개비리에서 통주용 요기를 세다가라나 되고도 미야기를 사고로 봐 제가 디니기 소수기다 튠케다 닝도당 디니기 토네 김멍부지 개와서 발에 이래요데 디니기 세다가라나 되고도 민도야기 지산 세다가라나 통남다 파벨람 기토에 겨와사용 거로 봐. 진짜 대소 디 가소레 안저의 통신용 유기에서 네 망보용 거로 봐. 진짜 데네기 망보용도 하되네. 야 데네기 배제로 되어봐네. 세다가라는 지직 차로 이 차로서 대소 소수기 튕기나 옛나 상외기 토만 있나다. 니버드 댕엔지게 지원에 용고래마다 차상한테 용토야 말아 봐.
So if we think of the students around Buddha Shakyamuni, so many, in dependence on his teachings, those causes created by hearing and reflecting on his teachings, in that very life became Arya beings, attained the path of seeing, or even became Arhats. So there we see illustration of karma created in that life, ripening in that life. But for whenever karmic imprints ripen, whether in the same life they are created, in the subsequent life or lives to come, they require ripening conditions. So in this illustration, then not only did the students around the Buddha who became Aryas or Arhats in that lifetime, not only did they have the direct cause of hearing the teachings of the Buddha and reflecting on those, but there were also other ripening conditions that led them to attain such an exalted state in that very life.
And 나중에 저기 ben에 지게 디도하다 저기 지게 주고자지 미시 가지 미시 쇠베이나 대 쇠비기 미쇠비기 자와지비기 레치사데 디 제보 다가란 세들이야 전가나다야 녀고야는 뭐 뭐라지리에 도와데 네디 아니 제보 조바레베선 조요 말와 디 아직 미쇠비기 레게 되고 끼와지마 나서도 용과야 되기 신의 하도요 봐 내가 때에 제보 충우 동안 용화데 세다가라냐 다가란데 전가나 주신 녀베 고가 동안 용과야 돼 용구도 와 이종아서 세보로 고마워 고가다 미쇠 발라서가 되는 즉 녀제 고가 전가나 로와야 뭐 용구로 와 그래서 세텔레 녀바 제제 디기 되고 다가란 요걸 남산민바 시작으로 와 이내한테 디기 되고다 다 숙체와 되게 신의 민기로 받아야.
What we can observe as probably illustrations of karma created in this life, ripening in this life, would be those who commit crime and are caught and prosecuted and imprisoned for their crime. So we could say that probably is the karma of, say, killing someone, that karmic cause leads to the result of their imprisonment. This could well be an illustration of karma created in this life that was of great magnitude, resulting in a karmic result experienced in this very life. But if we were to go a little further and say, oh, well then that karmic result now has ripened and therefore been exhausted, that is going too far, because especially with powerful karma, it may well have results beyond this one life. So the karmic cause may have been created in this life, the result may have come in this life, but the result may not necessarily be exhausted in this life, but could well continue into lives beyond this.
나 donda nyingbo de la ngang jugi khasanda dirin shuba di kharasana da ngang jugi divasya di da ngang ju dunga se di migo wanza dunga di banggo gore jiza da dunga banggo ba yinza da dunga yu di garre se da le miga wale de yongore esaje sungor jiza da miga wale de yonggo baza ngang dunga midio ba yinza dunga yu miga wadi jegyo mares di majebane 제보 동아리 용어 말에 해서지 제자디 밥방고 그래서 방고 뒤지겨 말해서 난 제자다 되네 다 대화 등한수 대화 뒤고래 제자 대화 되어버린다 대화 영역 유디 대화를 되네 용어 그래서 제자 한수 대화 거봐 인자다 이게 대화 영역 개화도 싸고 그래서 제자 디고 뽕 개화 주고 그래서 닝한 쪽에 개화 충충지네 제부 첨부야 용어 제자다 개와 충주이네 두고레스 되네 두고레 제자 레기 제부 가서 레기도 취미서와래 레 개와 충주 같이네 디 제부 요아이래 첨부나 제부 요아이 타 취미서와지다 이 충주이나 첨부다 강 토도기야도 개와도 두고레스 다 레기 미개와도 동아여서 동아 여기 미개 충주 제반에 제부 동아 첨부 연구에 차 연구하래 제가 디네서 미개와 충주시네 낭매 마타제 미개와 충주이네 바젠 빵고 그래 지교 말해서 미개와 가르치네 최종 가르치나 싸워 있는 지교 말해 제가 디네 제반자다 디네 제반은 디바디바 빵 개와디 강 투두가서 두고에는 제가 디네 장은 저기 디제부 대화디 용도 그래서 제가 다 미개 외교 미개와디 맞아 봐서 제부 동아리 용 말해서 제가 디네 자다 개와 두고야다 농아 빵고야디 고비 금전디 다 디제 세트 제부디 미디어 반자 디제고 거래 세상 되는 인자다 디 용야디 가용으로서는 다 제부 동알디 미고 용고요래 세베 네반이 봤으면 다 쳐가지고 거래서 세상 다 소수기 대화디게 있네 그 디기디게 있네 개와 개화질에 때는 용고래서 쌤이 이체 다 쳐가지고 그래서 쟤네 이체 다 쳐봐 네반이 봤리어도 소수기다 개와 준수에 충충 있는 주야다 아니 디고 충충 있는 맞아야지 디 용고래서 인자되니 인자다 donda 닝보들 디본 개루도 제고 그래 디 제발라 디네기 레균되게 돼 네반이 템보데 이체전 제바 있나 디 제본 저서 이체배 따와되다 타지도 땡땡레 세베 레균데 네바레 취미서 바레 세베 따와디 다 템부 지어베이나 아니 내가 되는 아주게 다 디본 개루 제야돼 용고래서 인자 디기에 첨부를 해야지 donda 닝보 디송거래다
To summarize this weekend, we've looked at these 4 points that in the presentation of karma in general. And these are important to reflect on so as to come to a deep and stable faith of conviction in the presentation of cause and effect. And why so? We all want to be happy. No one wants to suffer. Not wanting to suffer is natural to all of us, but yet we suffer. This is because we do not yet have a stable faith of conviction in the causes that lead to suffering. Hence, even if we know that certain ways of thinking or speaking or acting leads to suffering, we all too often engage in them. So we need to come to recognize not only what are the causes for suffering, namely non-virtuous karma, but we need to develop this deep and stable faith of conviction in the presentation of cause and effect, so that we can abandon the accumulation of further non-virtuous karma. And this comes about through recognizing that suffering doesn't befall us. It's not something that others do to us. It's not just bad luck. It's an expression of the causes that we have created, almost certainly in lives previous to this, and now we experience that suffering result. And we need to abandon not only the greatly negative things, which in most cases is pretty easy to do, but we also need to stop the smaller accumulations of non-virtue, things that we all too easily dismiss, thinking it doesn't matter, just this once and so forth. Through recognizing that karma increases in strength, particularly in this instance through habituation to even small non-virtues, leading to a growth in ripening, in the potential ripening result. And we can take confidence from the point that we will not meet suffering results if we have not created the causes. This can give us confidence then. By restraining myself, refraining from non-virtue, I will be limiting the amount of suffering to be experienced in this and lives to come. Likewise, though, with virtue. Because when reflecting on topics of the Dharma, we need to have a balanced approach, both focusing on what we need to refrain from, but also what we need to engage in. Recognizing that the spiritual goals that we aspire to, these we can achieve. We have this incredible potential that comes with this precious human rebirth. And just like so many other great beings, this could be that life where we finally accumulate sufficient virtue, turn away successfully from non-virtue, and gain a path, enter into the paths of the Bodhisattva. This is possible. All our spiritual goals are attainable, and they are attainable independent on creating specific causes. Merely having the wish, even making heartfelt prayers, is insufficient. We need to accumulate those causes. And if we do, we can be confident we will meet the results, because karma that we have created does not fade away. Also, if we have created the causes, it is certain the result will come about. Moreover, as was touched on this morning, if small virtues are accumulated skillfully with a mind that's intenso, with an awareness of what one is doing, and with a broad attitude, a deep understanding of what you're doing, even doing something minor or what others would consider insignificant, can be creating karmic causes that will lead to a powerful result, a result such as attaining the path of a bodhisattva. So what's being presented here in these 4 points needs to be taken to heart. Learn the 4 points, what they mean, reflect on them, see how they are true. Because we need to come to this point of having a stable faith of conviction in this presentation of cause and effect. Because then we will have the sufficient strength of mind to challenge deep-seated habitual tendencies. And by doing so, training our mind well in this way, we'll experience that we are developing a deeper natural aversion for non-virtue. It will be, for us, it will feel alien or foreign to talk or act or even think in a particular way. And likewise, developing a deeper natural habituation to virtue, we will naturally be kind-hearted people, naturally be generous, loving, tender, and caring for others. So the very foundation of all spiritual goals such as this, or all virtuous phenomena, is living in accordance with this correct view of the law of cause and effect.
the lady meba swimmer there, then again, new mobile, new body, new mobile, the meba social by the anti with me, Yomarwa, Kiani Mena, Mia Yomar. She's not again down, the Niki, Nimbu Tinge, Tiba Mashabache, and the Nimbu Matimba, two Shasha by in the would that Mamimba and a Kawa yellow over trouble in it, with the Mingri said, Nimbu Tinge, Komashaba Shabana, the Yunkures and Chidani Shiva Mato, that Nimbu Tinge, Pasha Shabana, Yomarwa.
A further important couple of points to make on this final point of karma you have created does not dissipate is that karma that we have created does not dissipate. This is completely correct. But non-virtue that one has accumulated, this can be either completely eliminated or sufficiently reduced that it doesn't ripen in the way it otherwise would have. And this is done through the application of antidotes, or the four opponent powers. By cultivating these, we can weaken or even eliminate past non-virtue. So in this way, it's not that the karma has dissipated, it's that through cultivating opponent powers, or the antidotes, one can purify past misdeeds. And the second point here to make is that it's not that every karmic imprint has to be experienced. When the time comes, when we abandon the afflictions together with their seeds, we will still have many karmic imprints, but the non-virtuous ones will not be able to ripen because the ripening condition of the afflictions is absent. So therefore, however much unpurified karma remains at that point, will not hinder one in that, absent of the afflictions, they are not going to ripen. And a further crucial point to take away from our weekend together is that one has to accumulate virtue. Not just the big things, but small virtue, and do so continuously. Together with that, dedicate the virtue you have created and make aspirational prayers. This is important, particularly in your prayers, in your prayers and dedication, to include this aspiration to keep our connection with the Buddha, Dharma and spiritual teachers for lifetimes to come, for lifetime after lifetime, to be in the physical presence of fully qualified spiritual teachers, and to have the qualities to recognize them for who they are, so that we readily give rise to faith in our spiritual teachers when we meet them life after life. And not only that we seek out their teachings and we strive to accomplish their teachings within us. And in this way, quickly attain the paths of the Bodhisattva, progressing to achieve the full goal of the Bodhisattva. So this too is an important point to take away from this weekend. Then thank you. Then we can conclude there for now. Thank you.